Hey guys, Raven here. The Elden Ring trailer is finally here and Jeff, well, he's out of gamer prison. I thought that the trailer was amazing and honestly it surpassed my expectations. The trailer has a tremendous amount of information and so I wanted to do a video for you guys breaking down this one. This is just a speculation video as the trailer just came out and we don't have a lot of information. As usual, I will focus on mechanics, weapons, etc. But I won't go into the lore as it's not really my thing. From a combat standpoint, if I was to define what I saw in the trailer, I would call it an evolution of the Soulsborne combat, namely Dark Souls 3 combat, so there are a lot of similarities and some new things. Let's break it down. The game seems to be set on a much larger world than previous From Software games, and so you can summon a horse to traverse it. It's a nice solution to be able to summon your mount from thin air, like in Destiny or Warcraft. It's not very fun to have to know where your mount is or have to wait for it to come to you. But there is also horseback combat. Horseback combat will probably only be possible on open areas and not on dungeons. We get a glimpse of horseback combat here, where the player seems to charge an attack. Because this is not a fast animation, there seems to be at least a light and a heavy attack. This means horseback combat will probably have some depth. Only later, we will see the pros and cons of this type of combat. In order to be an interesting mechanic, this type of combat needs to be situational. It cannot be a better option than foot combat in every open world scenario. In here we see the player character charging a one-hand straight sword R2. And now we see a two-hand straight sword block, but then we see what might be a counterattack mechanic, where the character spins to attack its enemy after blocking. A possible counterattack mechanic is a very interesting one. In Dark Souls games, a block cannot be followed with a different attack. It's just a block, knockback, neutral attack situation. There's not a great deal of fluidity. This system seems to change that. And also, the counterattack seems to trigger a weakened state on his opponent that can be followed by a riposte. So counterattacks might have different properties than those of a regular attack. This counterattack mechanic might be a pretty big change to combat. It would make two-handed weapon combat more interesting and more fluid, specifically in PvP. In Elden Ring, you will have to weigh the pros and cons of blocking with a weapon. If you miscalculate and get guard broken because blocking left you without stamina, you will leave yourself open for a riposte. However, if your calculations are correct, you might be able to counterattack your opponent for a big hit. It's a new and really interesting mechanic. Of course, at this time, we don't know how will stamina management be in this game. How much stamina points for a roll, for example. But looking at the enemy's attack speed and our rolling speed, I wouldn't be surprised if stamina costs are very similar to the ones on Dark Souls 3. Weapon arts also seem to be in this game. The player seems to be using a weapon art and not a spell, as the weapon art seems to be tailor-made for this sword because of its engravings. This is great. Weapon arts were a great addition to weapon moveset in Dark Souls 3. This also means that probably there will be a FP bar or a mana bar like in Dark Souls 3 from where you draw the power for spells and weapon arts. This is different to the system present in Dark Souls 1 and 2, where there was no mana bar or weapon arts and where you had a set number of spells whose quantity you could attune at a bonfire. This weapon reminds me a lot of the Ring Knight sword, where the weapon turned into a fire greatsword with its weapon art. In here we see a dismount attack. Notice how the horse fades while you dismount to plunge attack some enemies. Really cool stuff. This attack right here also seems to be a weapon art. It uses the Old Wolf curved sword moveset of Dark Souls 3. Also note how the player character receives the souls of the killed enemy. So in the trailer we seem to be able to summon help. From Software website says that we can summon spirit bodies. And in the website they show a character summoning some sort of a bird, with the same cube they show in the trailer right here. So in the trailer we see two spirit bodies being summoned. However, they might just be human players, I'm not totally sure. That said, the way they move is very characteristic of how Souls NPCs move. By this I mean they are walking. No human player walks, they run or they sprint. But this is a trailer, so who knows. If they are NPCs, that is a very cool mechanic. I always felt that in Dark Souls 3 it would be cool to be able to summon NPC phantoms to go through the level, instead of them almost always existing solely for help against bosses. This would make magic or bow playthroughs much more fun, as it is much harder to have a ranged playstyle while playing alone than if you pick a melee character. This said, that cube might also be the way to summon human players. We will have to wait to find out. Just a quick note to say that rolling attack was really fast for such a big bow. I really like that bows become more viable in reactive combat and are not only used for sniping enemies or pulling aggro. In here we see the player making the horse jump in order to avoid an AoE attack from the dragon, which is also a fun way of making horseback combat more interesting. Now we see that the horse can even double jump, which is really cool. I feel it would be really cool to be able to fight on horseback against some of the bigger bosses. The Midir fight in Dark Souls 3 had a lot of downtime for repositioning because Midir was so big and the arena so vast. Horse combat might alleviate this issue against these kind of bosses. In here we see the player dodging the boss attack with what is very likely is a quick step style weapon art. In here the player avoids a sweeping attack by jumping. Jumping will very likely have a dedicated button, like Sekiro does. In here we see that there is a possibility that power stance is back. Only Dark Souls 2 had this mechanic. Notice how the player has two weapons and that they are different. Both seem to be curved swords, but one has a curved blade and the other does not. It's more akin to a falchion. These weapons don't seem to be dual weapons because those tend to use the exact same weapon model in past games. There was really no advantage in Dark Souls 3 of using different curved swords, one on the right hand and the other on the left, except for very specific reasons such as pairing with the left one. So take this with a grain of salt, but I think power stancing might be in this game. Ultra weapons also make a comeback in this game as well. We can see a player wielding a great hammer here. Also, like in other From Software games, we can also wield our enemies' weapons. We can see the weapon wielded by the enemy here, and the same weapon wielded by the player here. In here we see the player using a stealth mechanic by crouching when approaching the enemies. This might be an ability all players have or a skill tree we have to choose. Most likely there will be backstabs in the game, but the player just does a spear R1. This weapon moveset seems to be a hybrid between a spear and a glaive, and is possibly also a catalyst. In here we see a kind of soul stream dark sorcery. Notice how there is a catalyst, so that also seems to be unchanged from previous games. Notice the fist weapons, claws to be exact on this frame right here. It's cool that fist weapons are back, they have a lot of character. Notice in this part of the footage how the player is using a pyromancy against this hand monster. It's a fire surge kind of spell. There are several types of shields in this trailer. I've seen small, medium and in these frames a great shield being used against this chariot enemy. Notice the jump in this scene. It's a really big jump. Jumps will definitely change combat, however I foresee a high stamina cost and significant recovery frames, or else we'll have Pogo Souls combat, which I don't think it will be the case. Finally, regarding multiplayer and more specifically invasions. Multiplayer co-op has been confirmed by official sources. Besides this, Omnipotent, the Recetary insider that has been spot on everything about this game, confirmed PvP. And although invasions are not confirmed, I think that they will also be present as a way of balancing this game's difficulty in co-op situations, as I've talked about so many times in the channel. It would be very sad if the only PvP in the game would be arena or dueling PvP, something that was never From Software's first goal for PvP in their past games. Dark Souls 1, for example, only had arenas in the DLC, and Dark Souls 3 as well, while invasions were there from the start. However, don't be surprised if there is not a lot of talk about invasions or PvP from official sources. Those news will come in due time. In conclusion, I'm really hyped for Elden Ring, and again, this trailer surpassed my expectations. Tell me if you see anything else that I might have missed from a mechanic, gear standpoint, and leave it in the comments. Besides this, if you have any questions, I will be sure to answer them. Thank you all for coming in and watching, and I'll see you guys next time.